Welcome everybody, my name is Severin and today we're speaking about the new moon in Virgo on the 17th of September 2020, and I'm naming this one Sandpapering Our Lives, Our Relationships and therefore the entire world. And sandpapering refers already to this new moon in Virgo, where we hopefully coming out the other end as a better version of ourselves and being of better service. I'm curious if you also, like me, finding some sarcasm in that, because it doesn't feel like all like that. Like, did you by any chance come up with any frustrations, any anger, any fears, any worries, any difficulties, any impatience? You basically name it. And yes, I had a big identity crisis with the last full moon in Pisces. It really pushed me on another domain where I was questioning everything about my life. My father was saying, maybe I have a midlife crisis. Maybe that's the case. I haven't figured it out yet. I can tell you later. But I'm just trying to share with you a little bit of my process, and as always, just finding language for what's going on, because really, like, astrology can be really helpful to give a little bit of support in that complex and challenging inner processes that we are all going through. So let's begin. Even though we have a new moon in Virgo, let's begin with the dominant factor, which is the Mars retrograde in Aries right now. And you know, like I have mentioned last time, it's still going on until the 14th of November. So we're really just at the beginning, and I hope it has been the hardest blast, but we are in a process. And normally when we have the Mars not in retrograde, so it happens every 2.5 years, and then we can just distract ourselves. We can go out and just go in another restaurant and then seeing another friend, or distract ourselves with a movie, having fun and just going for a bike ride or going swimming. But basically it's like this, we can just get the things done on an exterior level. But right now it's like it's not working for us. Something on an interior level is not working anymore. And you might feel that. Let's say normally you could just put that aside, that issue with your friend, that argument with your partner, or that, resentment towards your father, or the fear or the worries that are coming up. But when these emotions are becoming so strong, like now, then it affects our entire life, and it can be so strong that actually everything has to stop. And that means then that we have to deal with that emotion, and that's very frustrating. That's very annoying, because our normal life is not going on the way it should, or that we planned it, or that we wanted, right? And I'm just laughing at myself here, really. And it's so hard to actually understand, because now we normally would like to go into perfect controlling work and say, okay, what do you need, what do I need, that we can go back to normal? And what about if that's just not the situation right now, where you're like, well, I don't know what I need, or the other person said, I just need to have more space and I cannot tell you when I figure out what I actually need or what we can do together, or you yourself don't know what you actually want. So you're questioning a lot, and your power dynamics, Mars powers, is being questioned. Your leadership, the way you advise other people, the way you are handling a relationship, and you really have to question that. And that means then therefore, like, it's all about feeling that struggle, that fear, that old pattern that has been not coming up until now, and who knows why it's right now, but right now it's alive, and therefore it doesn't matter. And for me, it's like, then, well, what's the situation? What is this a childhood issue? Where's it coming from in the proper psychological way? And at the end of the day, it's like, okay, even if I would know the solution or the answer exactly, it still just hurts, or it's just very painful. It's very frustrating, and I'm feeling a fear of losing myself. And the only thing I can do is maybe requesting space, or requesting a different approach, and allowing myself to come in a space where I can look at that. And that is then when we could say that we actually, the best way that we could deal with intense emotions is when we actually allowing it to be in motions. So in motion is like when we are allowing it to flow through us. And that's already very scary, because we could actually be eaten up or overwhelmed, or we could lose towards that intense emotion. We could become the very thing that we're not allowing to flow through us. And that's exactly a very spiritual process that we are being forced into. And that then would actually really be helpful if we would understand some sort of spiritual practice. So it can also be a very physical practice where we're not trying to find a solution, where we're not trying to control it, where we're not trying to find the answer by when, things will work again and we can say, okay, everything is fine, we go back to normal. But instead actually say, okay, this is a process. I think it just needs patience and we just have to see how things are going. And that's very, very uncomfortable, especially if we want to know right now and have an answer. And that's then also like now, like there's an invitation like where Mars is actually in square with Saturn, Pluto and Jupiter. And you remember these three forces kind of represent in Capricorn, they represent the structure that we are in, or the work structure, and the economics that we are working with, or the surrounding that we are dealing with. And when we have square, it's like, but I cannot actually go in that process right now because I have to go to work, or I cannot become sick, because I actually have to be there tomorrow for an appointment, or I have to show up and be with my children and I cannot honor my personal process. So that can be feeling very difficult. And at the same time, this new moon now in Virgo is actually inviting us to come to a place where we actually sandpapering ourselves, because the Virgo is really this capacity of bringing out the best in ourselves. How can we not project that on somebody else? How can we take responsibility and ownership for something that we would like to blame somebody else because it's just too scary, too painful, too exhausting? And that's an invitation with this new moon to feel that. But it's also a little bit blurry because we have an opposition to Neptune in Pisces, which then is like, well, it's actually not clear what that actually means. And it's actually much more an invitation of contemplation, and therefore it's much more a place where we actually have to come, where meditation would actually be very helpful. Or let's say spiritual practice. It can also be, just cleaning the path, or you go climbing, or just walking in the mountains. But it's this place where we speak about metacognition. That would be a term that you would use as a psychologist. But meta just means beyond, and cognition means the capacity to think, so beyond thinking, or let's call it mindfulness. And therefore mindfulness, right, you could also say it's just this capacity of having a witness consciousness in which you observe anything that's alive in you, but you are not judging it. So awareness is when you observe, or you're becoming aware of something that's alive in you, can be a thought, emotion, image, whatever it is, but you're not judging that. So you actually feel that. And that's exactly what this Pisces Neptune opposing the Virgo is actually inviting us. So it can be a little bit confusing, this Virgo. Well, I can clearly see I have an overwhelming emotion, or I have resentment, I'm struggling and I'm having a challenge, because that's all the Mars that's coming up in retrograde. But I myself don't actually know how to deal with that. But remember, knowing is exactly from the mind, where we're trying to find a solution. But what about if we actually just have to allow the feeling to embrace that again? And then a lot of healing can come up from Chiron towards that Venus that we have here in Leo. So maybe we have to just step down from some of the expectations we have. We just have to actually honor our boundaries a little bit more and say, look, this is all I can give, and I would like to, and I know that this before it was different and it was possible, or actually it was even then not possible, but I was simply not voicing it. But now that I cannot deny that worry, that fear, I simply have to honor my boundaries. And that's exactly where we are being pushed in right now. We are recalibrating our power dynamics, and we are re-establishing our path forward. And that means perhaps that we have to deal with some fears or patterns that are not resolved. And that's not to make our life worse. Even for me, that feels like, wow, I don't know how to continue. I don't know how to go forward. But out of that kind of empathy or feeling, there's a famous teacher, Jürgen Trumpa, says when an intense emotion comes up, or anger, like, you don't suppress it, but you also don't give in. And it's a little bit like that right now in general with the process. It's like you don't suppress what's happening right now, but you also don't give in. So it is really this finding this patience of allowing the process to guide us rather than for us having a solution, and that perhaps will actually take more time than we wish to. So to wrap that up, it's not about winning or losing, it's much more about showing up. But if we are showing up, our asses get kicked. But that's the birthplace of renewal that we are looking for and healing. And it's not a moment where we actually resisting these fears, these anxieties, these scary, overwhelming emotions, doubts, worries. It's actually the very birthplace by embracing them from where love, belonging, joy, creativity, innovation, and empathy and so on is actually coming from. And that's exactly where we are right now. We have to admit that we cannot resist that process, we cannot control it, that we have to give in, and that's very scary. And that's where we can like partially surrender. And surrender, the Pisces, Neptune, but the partial is the Virgo, where we have to recognize our own boundaries. Like, what do I need right now that I can go willingly into that process without being hurt too much? What do I need? Do I need a good conversation? You know, a conversation with an older man, an older woman, like a mentor. I need more space. I need more alone time. I need better boundaries. I need an agreement. I need to be allowed to have time. Whatever it is, like you need to come to a place where you actually use that metacognition, that mindfulness, that meditation, where you focus again on awareness and presence, where you can recognize what you actually need, because you are the very source of where you can actually embrace and confront and allow this process. And then whatever is coming out on the other side, you're basically not in charge. And as long as you have been honest and clear with what is alive within you, then actually you don't even have to know, even though you would like to. So I really hope with that you have been supported a little bit on your journey. Any feedback is more than welcome. I feel quite vulnerable right now, so I just hope and wish you a wonderful new moon in Virgo, and I see you again for the full moon in Aries on the 1st of October, and you see like the Aries will be dominated more, so full moon, so the Mars retrograde and Chiron will play a story, and probably we have to give in to some of the expectations that we had initially, and our path will change a little bit, but only for the better, because we are being reconnected with something much deeper than we thought we know. All right, thank you so much and goodbye.